Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen and welcome back. Today I am sharing two cards in this video using the card kit from Gina K Designs that was just released called A Big Hello. Here's a quick look at the actual card kit. It has 3 stamp sets in here. 2 of them are large ones. Cardstock, stencil, dies, so much in there for such a great value. I'm going to start with this card here. It's a very clean and simple design, very easy to recreate. This is a look at one of the stamp sets in the card kit that is now available. It is a large 6x8 stamp set, has some floral images and sentiments on there. For the inks, I'm going to be using Red Velvet, Jelly Bean Green, Bubblegum, and Wild Lilac. And I also have some cardstock cut here. This is Jelly Bean Green cardstock that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then I have a white piece of cardstock here. This is Gina K Designs heavyweight cardstock. And I cut that to 3 3/4 by 5 inches. Now you can certainly do this process using an acrylic block. It would probably be a lot easier and faster, but my stamp isn't quite conditioned enough for me to trust using an acrylic block. So I'm using my trusty Misty tool, and I'm just doing some plain stamping. I'm taking the sentiment that I want to use and I'm using that as a guide. I'm lining that up about where I would want it to go, and then I'm stamping my flowers around that sentiment. So that first larger floral image I stamped in the Red Velvet ink. The second one I stamped in the Bubblegum pink ink. And then this third one I'm stamping in Wild Lilac. So it's just going to go around my sentiment, and even if I do end up stamping on top of it, I'm going to be using black ink, so it'll be perfectly fine if it goes on top of those images. So once again, using that sentiment as a guide and just removing it when I'm ready to stamp, I'm going to add some leaves using the Jelly Bean Green ink. So there are actually 2 leaf images in the stamp set, but I really favored this one for some reason. So I just kind of cleaned it, moved it around. Like I said, probably a lot easier to do it with a comfort block, but I already had my Misty set up, so that's just what I'm going to use. Once I have all of those images stamped, I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I'm moving my cardstock to the top corner and I'm bringing in this ruler. I think this is part of the Misty Corners set. And I'm just bracing that up on the side of my Misty tool, and then I can push up my sentiment where I want it. That is going to help align my sentiment, make it perfectly straight as long as I have it centered there on that card panel. So once I'm happy with that, I'll close the door of the Misty to pick that sentiment up, remove that ruler, and then I'm going to stamp this with the Obsidian Amalgam ink. Once the stamping is all done, I can just go ahead and attach my card panel to the Jelly Bean Green cardstock that I'm using. That's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I will add this to a white card base later on. So I just used Gina K Designs dot runner to attach that. I love this dot runner because I have a little bit of wiggle room. Once you push that down is when the adhesive really sticks to your cardstock. And I couldn't resist adding a little bit of sparkle. So I am taking my aqua shimmer pen and I'm just going to paint over all of that area that I just stamped. I'll kind of wipe my brush off on that scratch paper a little bit. There was a little bit of ink that picked up, but not a lot, and I'm not going very heavy with this. So once I went around all of the flowers and the leaves, it's going to add a beautiful shimmer to the card. It's real subtle, but it just adds a little bit of more interest to the card. And I'll give you a close-up here in just a second. And once that catches the light, see, it's just a subtle shimmer. It's really, really pretty in person. And the light's going to catch that purple just perfectly. So this is our first card. Like I said, very easy, just to give you some inspiration to start working with the card kit. And I will have more information and the supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. Here is the second card we're going to create. So I dove into some ink blending. This is using the same stamp set. It just has some different images on it. And I'm kicking right off with the ink blending. So for it, I am using the Gina K Designs layering weight cardstock. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I will trim it down later on once the ink is dry, but I like to start with that full card panel just in case I decide to make that the entire card. Now I did speed this up quite a bit because I did really work that ink. I am using the Bubblegum Pink, the Wild Lilac, and the Red Velvet, and I'm blending that with the Life Changing blender brushes. So I start off with the lightest color first, which is the Bubblegum Pink, work in the Red Velvet, and I like to kind of clean up some of that ink a little bit in between, and then add that Wild Lilac. And this does look pretty drastic here at first, but I do go back and forth over it a couple times and then walk away, let the ink dry. With Gina's inks, once they sit and are dry, they blend so smoothly, or it has a very smooth look to it. Now I did go ahead and trim this down once the ink was dry, and this panel is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I'm using that large floral image there, and I'm using the Misty corner so that I have a little bit of edge there. I knew this was going to hang off of that cardstock a little bit, so that Misty corner gives me that little bit of wiggle room, that cushion there off on the side, so I can stamp off of the cardstock. And then just inking that up with Gina's Obsidian ink. I can close the door and stamp that down, and it is such a crisp black. I had happy fingers there if you noticed. I was so excited. So next, I didn't need the Misty corner anymore. Nothing else was going to hang off of the cardstock. So I added this beautiful butterfly on there. It's such a gorgeous design. And then I'm lining up the sentiment, the big hello. Now I'm not going to stamp this just yet. I had to kind of dry my panel. I really needed this panel to be completely dry before I do any heat embossing. And you can always give it a test to see if it's completely dry. If you just sprinkle on the embossing powder and it sticks to your cardstock, then you know your ink's not dry yet. So once I felt that mine was completely dry, I'm just prepping that area with an anti-static powder tool, brushing that powder around. And then I'm going to ink up that large hello, that big hello, with some of Gina K Designs embossing ink. And I just want to make sure I'm patting that up and down to get some really good coverage on my stamp. And then I can close the door of the Misty and just give that a good push. Then I'm going to sprinkle on the silver embossing powder. And if there's any little speckles left over, which I did end up having, I just took a paintbrush and kind of brushed those speckles away while my heat gun is off on the side warming up. And then I can bring my heat tool over and melt that embossing powder so it's this beautiful shiny silver on there. And I did still want to add one more sentiment to this. This large stamp set has a ton of these little sentiments on here. I love the font. I love the size of these. They're so perfect. And I thought I was just going to keep this the one layer on this front panel. So once again, I had brought in my Misty ruler so I could straighten my sentiment, and then stamped that in the Obsidian ink as well. And one of the great things about using my Misty, I didn't push down enough so I could stamp that again. Now I'm just going to layer this up. So I started with black Onyx cardstock. That's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Layering that with the heavyweight cardstock. That's the white. And that was cut to 4 by 5 1/4. And then attaching my front panel here with the dot runner. And see, I wasn't quite happy with how I lined up. So because I didn't push down, I'm able to pick that up and move it around a little bit until I'm ready, and then giving that a nice good push so that adhesive sticks really well. So there's just a couple quick ideas for you to get you started with the Big Hello card kit from Gina K Designs. It is now available, ready for purchase. The supplies will be listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you again real soon.